So let's have a short discussion about copyright law. On the previous screen, you were asked to respond to two questions regarding copyright law. The first asked what you knew about copyright law, and the second asked why it might be important for you to understand copyright law and be able to share that law, understanding of the law with your students. So look at the slide here. This gives a good summary of what copyright law is and what it's kind of meant to cover. It says, in order to balance public interest with the rights of the individual author or creator, that's the goal of copyright law, is finding some sort of a balance between people who have created and should rightly profit by the things that they have created, and those of us who need to use those things in the public interest. And there certainly is a lot of creative work that is important in the public interest for us to share. Copyright law covers our ability to copy, share, or display different creative works. For example, for copy, if you have a DVD or a CD that you want to use and a friend comes to you and says, hey, can I download that DVD onto my iPod? That would be breaking copyright law. That is not a legal way to copy that work or to share it. But if it's for your own personal use, then that's okay. To display, if you have a work of art or some other creative work that you want to display in your own home and you have purchased that to display in your own home, that's fine. But as soon as you want to share it with the general public and put it on display out in a general use area, then you're beginning to infringe on copyright law, and you have to be careful of that. We're talking about creative works such as music, videos, photos. All of those fall under copyright law. Anything that's a creative work, whether it's music or video, movies, DVDs, CDs, things like that. Now, there is a clause to the copyright law that really helps us as educators be able to be a little more open and able to use things in what we're doing. So let's look at the second slide here. This is the fair use clause of the copyright law, and this has particular application for us as educators. Look at the items that this lists the criteria that allows you to use an item despite the fact that it's copyrighted. So the slide says, but you as educators can use other people's creative works if it meets these guidelines. So when you're ready to use something in class, like a segment from a DVD or a little piece of music, you need to look at this criteria and match back and say, am I doing these things? The criteria say that it is for nonprofit or educational purposes. That's our education clause that lets us as teachers use creative works. It is not something being sold to schools, teachers, or students. Now that's an important thing to keep in mind. If the DVD that you want to show to your class is part of a textbook bundle that is sold only to schools, then you have a problem and you're infringing on copyright law, because the only place that these items are marketed is to schools. And so that isn't very fair to use what is only sold to schools freely as an educator in your school, if that makes sense. The next criteria, it is not something, the third criteria, you use less than 10% of the work. Now that's important. When you choose how much of for example, a Shakespeare movie to show to your Shakespeare class, be sure that the clip that you're showing is 10% or less of the whole DVD. And then you're in a safe zone for sharing that little clip of the movie for educational purposes. Fair use does not cover showing an entire Disney movie to a class as a reward for something that they've done in school. It needs to be tied directly to the teaching and what is happening, not as a reward, and not the entire movie. Students who create videos and want to use a little portion of a song in their video as the background music, well, as long as it is being used for educational purposes, and that is the case in doing that assignment, and it's 10% or less of the song, then they're okay. So keep that in mind as you're counseling your students on how to use creative works when they're doing their homework and doing assignments like that. The last criteria, your use does not diminish the market value of the copyrighted work. In the example of using just a little bit of a clip of a movie in class, you're not going to diminish the market value of the copyrighted work by doing that. And in fact, you might even increase it because students might want to go out and actually buy that movie. However, if they come to you after class and say, hey, can I borrow that movie and make a copy of it? That, of course, is outside of fair use and infringement of copyright law. You can't share it that way. But if what you're doing, it kind of comes to one of those moral judgments. Look at what you're doing. Does it cover this criteria? Do you honestly feel that you are not infringing on that creator's right to be able to make money from what they're doing? Then you're safe. Other than that, that kind of gives you a good overview of copyright law and what is fair use. And the final part of the question was teaching it to our students. Why is it important? It's particularly important to teach this to them as their teachers who are to set the example for them. We're not just filling students' minds with facts and figures. We're trying to teach them how to become good citizens, and part of being good citizens, of course, is being law-abiding citizens. And one of the laws of our land is copyright law. And so when we choose to break copyright law because it makes our job easier or for any other reason as teachers, we are actually making it harder on society to help these new members of society understand what the moral standard is regarding copyright and regarding keeping our laws. If we're breaking copyright law, of course, they can take that and say, well, if we can break copyright law and that doesn't matter, what other laws can we break that really don't matter? And that's not something we want to teach in our efforts to create good, moral, strong citizens in our country. And that's a little about copyright law.